Hello, my second grade friends. I'm actually going to continue to read the Humphrey book to you guys. I hope to do one chapter every week until we get back, and hopefully we will finish the book when we get back to school. When we were, last time I saw you in the library, we were reading after, I believe, Humphrey has spent the day at one of the classmates' house, and or the weekend at one of the friends' house, and now um, he is back at his classroom after the long weekend. Okay, so here we go. Chapter 10: The Very Worst Day. That Monday was an unspeakably difficult day. More difficult than any day we had last year in room 26. First, Thomas said he had seen a wolf while he was walking to school. But Mrs. Brisbane got him to admit that it might have been a very big dog. You know, our friend Thomas likes to exaggerate. Mrs. Brisbane reminded him not to exaggerate. There she goes, reminding him again. Remember, he said he caught a fish as big as his boat. Now he's seen a wolf while he was walking to school. Worse yet, Phoebe had forgotten her spelling homework and burst into tears, which made me feel so sad. Next, Mrs. Brisbane asked Paul to come up to the board for some math problems, and both Small Paul and Tall Paul jumped out of their seats when they got to the board at the same time. They glared at each other. Sorry, guys, I meant Paul G., Mrs. Brisbane explained. Tall Paul turned red and Small Paul scowled as he returned to his seat. Scowl means you're like, not very happy. Small Paul liked to do math problems in front of the class. Tall Paul got the problem wrong and turned an even deeper shade of red. Now he's really angry. As if that wasn't bad enough, Kelsey skinned her knee at recess and had to go to the nurse's office. Then Mrs. Brisbane had an excellent idea, as she often does. She decided to put me in my ball and let me roll up and down the aisles. She probably wanted to get her students' mind off of their problems. Can you imagine if you were in class, in Miss Brand's class, and there's a little hamster running around, a little ball rolling around in your classroom? Wouldn't that be kind of fun? It would be very interesting if all humans could get a hamster eye view of their world at least once. If they did, they would probably clean their shoes more often. There really are unsqueakably awful things stuck to the bottoms of many shoes. Yuck. Humans could pay more attention to their socks too. On that day, both Thomas and Kelsey had on mismatched socks. They also realize how much they tap their feet and move around in general, even when they think they are sitting still. As I spin around the classroom, I'm always glad I have that ball to protect me. Despite the dangers, I kept rolling around lazily. The students were reading to themselves, and after a little while didn't even seem to notice me. As I approached Rosie's table, I decided it would be interesting to get a closer look at her wheelchair. I still had not figured out exactly how she popped a wheelie. Rosie saw me coming closer and her eyes sparkled. "Hi, Humphrey," she whispered. But when I got a little closer, Holly let out a yelp and grabbed my hamster ball, picking it up so quickly that I was doing somersaults inside the ball. "Eek!" I squeaked. "What is it, Holly?" the teacher asked. "Humphrey could trip up Rosie's wheelchair. He got way too close," she said, holding up the ball, "but I got him now." "He wasn't too close," Rosie protested. "I saw him there." "I think it's dangerous," Holly said. "The way you picked him up is dangerous," Rosie replied. "You could have hurt poor little Humphrey." I don't like to think about myself as poor little anything, but she was right. I wasn't hurt, but I was definitely dizzy. Can you imagine being picked up so fast he was moving around in a little ball? "You must remember to be gentle with Humphrey," Mrs. Brisbane said as she took the ball away from Holly. She peered in through the little yellow plastic. "Are you all right, Humphrey?" I squeaked. That was a little weaker squeak than normal. He was probably like, squeak. Mrs. Brisbane put me back in a cage, satisfied that I was okay. I headed straight to my sleeping hut, which was the safest, quietest place I knew. I crawled out a little while later when I heard Rolling Rosie ask if she could speak to Mrs. Brisbane. The room was empty because it was lunchtime. You didn't pop a wheelie again, did you, Rosie? The teacher asked. No, Rosie answered. It's about my assistant. Holly? Mrs. Brisbane said. Why don't you tell me what's on your mind? Rosie wheeled up close to the desk, and she and Mrs. Brisbane talked. Og and I were as silent as we could be, so we could hear every single word they said. I don't think I need an assistant, she explained. I can do almost everything myself, so why could you tell Holly not to help me anymore? Mrs. Brisbane was silent for a moment. I could, she finally said, but do you really want me to? Yes, Rosie answered. I know Holly wants to help, but she helps way too much. She helps me when there's no problem at all. Sometimes she actually gets in my way. Have you told her that? Mrs. Brisbane asked. Rolling Rosie nodded. I said she didn't need to help so much. It didn't work. Again, Mrs. Brisbane was silent for a while. I can see you don't need very much help, Rosie. But maybe Holly does, she finally said. Holly? Rosie sounded really surprised. She likes to help, Mrs. Brisbane explained. I think she would be pretty upset if I said you didn't need her help anymore. Maybe she could help someone else, Rosie suggested. Let's give her one more chance, Rosie, Mrs. Brisbane said. I'll have a word with her and see if things improve, okay? Good old Mrs. Brisbane, she really knew how to handle students. Now, we better go eat. I'm going down to the lunchroom too, she said. As I headed out of the classroom, I couldn't wait to talk to Og. Oh, were you listening, Og? I asked my neighbor. Helpful Holly will be upset if she gets fired. I knew that because I would be unsqueakably upset if I got fired from my job as the classroom hamster. Boing, 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 Og agreed as he splashed his water. I thought the day would never end, but alas, the afternoon bell rang. As the students gathered up their backpack, Mrs. Brisbane took a sheet of orange paper and approached Phoebe. Phoebe, I have an idea to help you remember your homework, she said. Each day we will put a big, colorful reminder in your backpack so you won't miss it. What do you think? Okay, Phoebe said. I've written your homework assignment on it. All you have to remember is to bring it back, Mrs. Brisbane continued. Phoebe nodded. I will, she said. She promised. You can do it, Phoebe, I squeaked, and then I hopped on my wheel and I started spinning as fast as I could. I think she was smiling when she left the room. The day took a turn for the better after school when some of my old friends from last year came back to room 26. There was Raise Your Hand, Heidi Hopper, and her best friend, Stop Giggling, Gail Morgenstern, along with Repeat It Please, Richie Rinaldi. I was spinning on my wheel when they came in, and I was so glad to see them. I stopped suddenly and almost tumbled off. Please don't make sudden stops when you're spinning on a wheel. Hi, I squeaked. I'm not sure if they could hear me over the loud splashing sound Og was making. Humphrey, my favorite hamster, Heidi said as she rushed up to my cage. Gail giggled. Og, my favorite frog, she said as she hurried to my friend's tank. And you're my favorite teacher, Richie told Mrs. Brisbane. Oh, thank you, Richie, she replied, but you have to give Miss Becker a chance. She's an excellent teacher. I know, Richie said, but she doesn't have any classroom pets. Heidi leaned in close to my cage. I'm doing pretty well raising my hand this year, Humphrey, she told me. That was unsqueakably good news. Mrs. Brisbane and I had worked hard to help her end her bad habit. I guess she would always shout out answers without raising her hand and being called on. Boing, boing, Og twanged, setting Gail into peals of laughter. I didn't think Gail could ever stop giggling completely. At least I hope not. I was so glad to see my old friends from last year. I jumped on my wheel and I started spinning fast, which made them all giggle. Go, Humphrey, go, Richie said. Then Og decided to dive into the water side of his tank and made an extra big splash, which made them giggle even louder. Awesome, Og, Heidi said. I think Og and Humphrey are glad to see you, Mrs. Brisbane said. Oh, Mrs. Brisbane, we miss him so much, Heidi said. We came to ask you something important, though. I slowed down the wheel. You say it, Richie, Gail said. Okay. Richie suddenly looked serious and he cleared his throat. Mrs. Brisbane, we don't think it's fair that you have 2 classroom pets in room 26, and we don't have any in room 18. We were hoping you would donate one of yours to Mrs. Becker. I don't know if that's a good idea. Thank goodness I hopped off my wheel. I would have fallen over. I was really, really, really surprised, and so was Mrs. Brisbane. Goodness, I don't think my students would like that, she said. If Miss Becker wants a classroom pet, she can get her own. But I'm not sure she wants one. She would like Humphrey or Og. Everybody does, Gail said. And Og came here from another classroom, Heidi said. At least ask her, please, which he begged. Mrs. Brisbane was unusually quiet. I was too. And I didn't hear a boing or a splash from Og. Please, Gail looked so serious I could barely believe it was her speaking. Please, Heidi added. At last, Mrs. Brisbane spoke. To tell you the truth, I can't imagine giving up either of them. Don't you think they would miss each other? Heidi and Gail glanced at each other. They weren't always together. Humphrey was alone in the beginning, Richie said. I had to squeak up for myself, but it was so lonely at night, even scary. I'd almost forgotten how loud the clock sounded in the empty room and how long the nights were without somebody splashing nearby. Boing, boing, Og agreed. Boing, boing, boing. That made Gail giggle, of course. Mrs. Brisbane smiled. I'll tell you what. I'll think about it. And then I'll talk to Miss Becker about classroom pets. But I'm just not sure it's a good idea to separate Humphrey and Og and take one of them away from my class. Thanks, Mrs. Brisbane. We really miss them, Richie said. They chatted with the teacher for a few more minutes, and then it was time for them to go home. After they left, Mrs. Brisbane leaned in close to my cage and stared at me. To tell the truth, I can't imagine teaching without you and Og to help me out, she said. Am I just being selfish? No, I squeaked at the top of my tiny little lungs. Mrs. Brisbane chuckled. I don't think Arlene Becker wants any classroom pets. Not even you, she said. So don't worry. Thanks, I squeaked. I won't. But I did. I worried and worried and worried some more. And even though he hatched from an egg and was cold-blooded, I could tell that Og was worried too. Humphrey's rule of school. It's actually possible to be too helpful. What do you think that means? It is actually possible to be too helpful. So think about our friend, Helpful Holly. You know, she's always trying to help out Rolling Rosie with her wheelchair, and Rosie doesn't really need any help. She already said she can wheel herself around a classroom and get all the supplies herself. She can do a lot of things. And it's okay that she is in a wheelchair. She can do all those things. But Helpful Holly tends to think that she needs a lot of help. So I think that's what Humphrey's rule means, that it is actually possible to be too helpful. Meaning, if somebody doesn't need help and they don't ask for it, you don't always have to step in. Kind of like what Rosie was thinking. When Humphrey was on the floor, she was fine. Rosie wasn't going to roll over Humphrey, but she was so worried that Humphrey was going to get in Rosie's way that Helpful Holly picked him up. And then it made Humphrey very dizzy. So I don't think he really liked that. Remember? He said he felt dizzy. And Rosie definitely did not like that because she's like, I saw him. He wasn't getting in my way. I wasn't going to get hurt just because Humphrey's on the floor. So, my friends, that is our chapter for today. Next week, we'll read another chapter from our book. And I hope to see you guys soon. And I hope you're being good at home. And I miss seeing you guys. And again, hope to see you guys soon. Have a good day. Bye. Have a good week.